The sound of screeching tires on pavement cut through the quiet Saturday morning like a blade through silk. Marcus Thompson looked up from his morning coffee, already knowing what he'd see through his kitchen window, another reckless driver treating his residential street like a racetrack. What he didn't expect was to see his 8-year-old nephew Danny frozen in terror in the middle of the crosswalk, a soccer ball rolling away from his trembling hands. The silver BMW had missed the boy by mere inches. Marcus was already moving before his coffee mug hit the counter. 23 years of military training don't just disappear when you hang up the uniform, and every instinct screamed danger as he watched the luxury sedan reverse aggressively, the driver's window rolling down to reveal a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and fury etched across her Botox features. "Get that little brat out of the street," Karen Whitmore's voice pierced the morning air like broken glass. "This is a private neighborhood. Kids like that don't belong here." Danny stood paralyzed, his dark skin flushed with embarrassment and fear. The soccer ball, a birthday gift Marcus had given him just last week, sat abandoned in the gutter, already forgotten in the face of this woman's venom. Marcus emerged from his house with the fluid, purposeful movement of someone accustomed to dangerous situations. He wasn't a large man, 5'10" with a lean build, but there was something in his posture that made people take notice. His gray eyes, calm as winter steel, assessed the situation with military precision. "Ma'am," Marcus said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who commanded respect in war zones. "You nearly hit my nephew. I think an apology might be in order." Karen's BMW idled aggressively as she stepped out, her designer heels clicking against the asphalt like weapons. She was the kind of woman who wore her privilege like armor, Mercedes keychain dangling from manicured fingers, diamond tennis bracelet catching the morning sun, and an expression that suggested the world owed her something. "Apology?" she screeched, her voice climbing octaves. "That kid ran into the street. In my neighborhood. I could have damaged my car." "Your neighborhood." Marcus moved closer to Danny, placing a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. He could feel the child trembling. "Last I checked, public streets belong to everyone. Not when people like you move in and bring down property values." Karen's mask slipped completely now, revealing the ugly truth beneath her suburban respectability. "I know exactly what you are, probably dealing drugs, definitely up to no good. This used to be a safe neighborhood." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Marcus felt Danny shrink against him, and something cold and dangerous stirred in his chest, the same feeling he'd experienced in Afghanistan when Taliban fighters had threatened innocent civilians. But Karen Whitmore wasn't done. She pulled out her iPhone with theatrical flair, her thumb hovering over the numbers like she was wielding a weapon. "I'm calling the police," she announced triumphantly. "There's a suspicious black man threatening me and endangering children in our neighborhood. They'll know exactly how to handle this situation." Marcus watched her dial 911 with the same detached interest he'd once reserved for observing enemy movements through a sniper scope. She had no idea what she just set in motion. "Go ahead," he said quietly, his voice carrying a hint of something that made Karen pause mid-dial. "Call them." As Karen began speaking to the dispatcher in urgent, dramatic tones, Marcus pulled Danny close and whispered, "Stay calm, buddy. Uncle Marcus has dealt with much worse than this." He had no idea how right he was about to be proven. The police cruiser rounded the corner exactly 11 minutes after Karen's frantic call. Marcus had counted. Old habits from his reconnaissance days never died, and timing everything had become second nature. 2 officers emerged from the patrol car, a younger rookie whose hand instinctively drifted toward his service weapon, and a grizzled veteran whose weathered face suggested he'd seen enough domestic disputes to fill a novel. Karen immediately launched into her performance, her voice pitched to maximum victimization. "Officers, thank God you're here. This man has been harassing me and terrorizing the neighborhood children." She gestured dramatically toward Marcus, who stood with Danny still tucked protectively beside him, his posture relaxed but alert. "He came charging out of that house like a maniac when I was simply driving through my neighborhood," Karen continued, her voice dripping with manufactured terror. "I think he might be on drugs. You can see it in his eyes. And look how he's got that poor child cowering. Probably kidnapped him." The rookie officer, whose nameplate read Martinez, stepped forward with the kind of aggressive energy that Marcus recognized from fresh-faced soldiers eager to prove themselves. "Sir, I need you to step away from the child and put your hands where I can see them." Marcus didn't move. 23 years of military discipline had taught him the value of measured responses, and this situation called for precision, not compliance born of fear. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice carrying the same calm authority that had once briefed Pentagon officials, "that's my nephew Danny. We live at 1247 Maple Street, 3 houses down." The child was crossing the street to retrieve his soccer ball when this woman nearly struck him with her vehicle. "That's a lie," Karen shrieked, her performance reaching operatic levels. He's obviously not related to that child. Look at him. He's probably some criminal who snatched that boy off the street. The veteran officer, Sergeant Reynolds, according to his badge, held up a weathered hand. Something in Marcus's demeanor had caught his attention. The way he stood, the calm in his voice, the professional manner in which he'd addressed them. Reynolds had served 2 tours in Iraq before joining the force, and he recognized something familiar in this man's bearing. "Ma'am, please step back," Reynolds said firmly to Karen. "Sir, can you provide identification?" Marcus slowly reached into his back pocket, moving with deliberate precision that any law enforcement officer would appreciate. But instead of pulling out his standard driver's license, he produced a black leather wallet that made Reynolds' eyes widen slightly. "Marcus Thompson," he said, handing over not just his license, but a military ID that was clearly not standard issue. "Former Colonel, United States Army Special Operations Command. This is my nephew, Danny Martinez. His mother, my sister Alina, works the weekend shift at St. Mary's Hospital. Would you like her contact information to verify?" Officer Martinez's hand slowly moved away from his weapon as the implications sank in. Karen, however, was far from finished. "I don't care what fake IDs he's got," she screamed, her face now an alarming shade of red. "This is clearly some kind of setup. He's probably stolen that child. Check the Amber Alerts. I bet this kid's been missing for days." Reynolds examined the military ID more closely, and Marcus watched recognition dawn in the older officer's eyes. The ID wasn't just military, it was the kind carried by personnel whose service records were largely classified, whose units didn't officially exist in Pentagon or charts. "Colonel Thompson," Reynolds said, his tone shifting to something approaching respect, "can you tell me exactly what happened here?" "Certainly, Sergeant." Marcus's use of Reynolds' rank wasn't accidental. It was one professional acknowledging another. At approximately 8:47 hours, Mrs. Whitmore was driving recklessly through this residential area. My nephew was legally crossing the street in the designated crosswalk when her vehicle nearly struck him. Rather than apologizing or showing concern for the child's welfare, she immediately began verbally assaulting both of us with what I can only describe as racially motivated harassment. Danny finally found his voice, looking up at his uncle with a mixture of awe and relief. "Uncle Marcus," she called us the bad words, the ones Mom said people used to call Grandpa. Karen's face went pale as she realized her performance was rapidly losing its audience. "You can't seriously be believing this. Look at them. This is obviously some kind of gang situation." That's when Sergeant Reynolds made a decision that would change everything. He walked back to his patrol car and made a call that Karen couldn't quite hear. When he returned, his expression had shifted completely. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his voice now carrying an edge of steel, "I've just run Colonel Thompson's identification through our system. Would you like to know what came up?" The color drained from Karen's face as she realized that her perfectly crafted narrative was about to crumble around her. Sergeant Reynolds closed his phone with a deliberate click that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. His expression had transformed from professional courtesy to something approaching reverence, and even Officer Martinez sensed the shift in atmosphere. "Mrs. Whitmore," Reynolds said slowly, "Colonel Thompson's service record is mostly classified, but what I can tell you is this. He's a recipient of the Medal of Honor, 2 Purple Hearts, and the Distinguished Service Cross. He spent 15 years with Delta Force before transitioning to intelligence operations in the Middle East." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That's impossible. He's just some." "Some what, ma'am?" Reynolds' voice carried a warning that made even Marcus raise an eyebrow. "Because from where I'm standing, you've just filed a false police report against a decorated war hero who was protecting his nephew from your reckless driving." Marcus finally spoke, his voice carrying a hint of steel that hadn't been there before. "Sergeant, I appreciate the introduction, but let's focus on the facts. Mrs. Whitmore nearly struck a child in a crosswalk, showed no remorse, and then made racially motivated threats before calling in a false report. What concerns me most is that this appears to be a pattern of behavior." "Pattern?" Officer Martinez asked, genuinely curious now. Marcus pulled out his smartphone with the same methodical precision he'd shown with his identification. "While we were waiting for you to arrive, I took the liberty of checking the neighborhood's social media groups and local police call logs." His fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency. "Mrs. Whitmore has called 911 on 14 different occasions in the past 6 months, always targeting families of color who've moved into this neighborhood." Karen's face went from pale to ashen. "How did you? That's private information." "Actually, it's public record," Marcus replied calmly. "And when you spent years gathering intelligence in hostile territories, researching suburban troublemakers becomes remarkably simple." He turned the phone screen toward the officers. "June 15th. Reported the Johnson family for suspicious barbecue activity. July 3rd. Called about the Martinez family, no relation to Danny here, for playing ethnic music too loudly. August 12th. reported Dr. Patel for running a drug operation that turned out to be his home medical practice. Reynolds examined the phone, his expression growing darker with each entry. Mrs. Whitmore, is this accurate? I was protecting the neighborhood. Karen's voice climbed to a desperate pitch. Property values, safety. You don't understand what these people, Marcus interrupted, his voice dropping to the level he'd once used to interrogate enemy combatants, include a pediatric surgeon, a NASA engineer, 2 school teachers, and a veteran who served 3 tours in Afghanistan. But please continue explaining how we're threatening your safety. Danny looked up at his uncle with wide eyes. Uncle Marcus, you were really in the army. Marcus' expression softened as he looked down at his nephew. I was, buddy. For a long time. And one of the things they taught me was that bullies usually back down when someone stands up to them. But Karen wasn't backing down, she was doubling down with the desperation of someone watching their world collapse. This is all lies, he's obviously hacked into police systems or something. You can't trust anything he says. That's when Sergeant Reynolds' radio crackled to life. Unit 47. This is dispatch. We've got a priority call from the Pentagon requesting immediate confirmation of Colonel Marcus Thompson's location and status. The street fell completely silent except for the static from the radio. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Marcus sighed at the sound of a man who'd hoped to keep his past buried. Tell them Colonel Thompson is secure in handling a domestic disturbance. No federal intervention required. Reynolds stared at him. Sir, the Pentagon is calling about you. Old habits, Marcus said simply. When certain people's names get run through certain databases, it triggers automatic notifications. I'm supposed to be retired, but apparently my former colleagues still keep tabs on me. Karen's world was collapsing in real time, but her entitled rage wouldn't let her accept reality. This is all some elaborate hoax. No way some random black guy in the suburbs is some military hero. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and for the first time since the confrontation began, Marcus allowed a smile to cross his face. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of expression that had once made enemy interrogators reconsider their career choices. Mrs. Whitmore, he said quietly, you have no idea how big a mistake you've just made. As if summoned by his words, 2 black SUVs with government plates rounded the corner, moving with the purposeful efficiency of a federal response team. The SUVs came to a synchronized stop, their engines cutting off in perfect unison. 4 individuals emerged, 2 men and 2 women, dressed in dark suits that screamed federal authority. They moved with the coordinated precision of a unit that had worked together for years, their eyes constantly scanning for threats, even in this suburban setting. The lead agent, a woman with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command, approached the group with purposeful strides. Her badge identified her as Agent Sarah Chen, FBI. Colonel Thompson, she said, her voice carrying both relief and mild exasperation. When your name popped up in our monitoring systems flagged for a potential threat situation, Director Hayes nearly had a heart attack. Are you secure? Marcus nodded, his hand still protectively on Danny's shoulder. Secure, Agent Chen. Just dealing with a case of suburban harassment that got out of hand. Karen's eyes darted between the federal agents like a trapped animal looking for an escape route. This is insane. You people can't just show up in a residential neighborhood. I know my rights. Agent Chen turned her attention to Karen with the kind of look usually reserved for particularly annoying insects. Mrs. Karen Whitmore, 42 of 1283 Maple Street, divorced, real estate agent with Prestige Properties, currently under investigation by the Fair Housing Authority for discriminatory practices. The blood drained from Karen's face. How do you know? Mrs. Whitmore, Agent Chen continued, consulting a tablet that had appeared in her hands. You filed 14 false police reports targeting minority families in this neighborhood over the past 6 months. You've also posted 17 discriminatory reviews on Neighborhood Watch apps and sent 43 harassing emails to the Homeowners Association requesting demographic screening of new residents. Officer Martinez whistled low. Ma'am, that's potentially criminal harassment. But Agent Chen wasn't finished. What you didn't know, Mrs. Whitmore, is that Colonel Thompson isn't just any retired military officer. He's currently under federal protection due to his work dismantling terrorist networks in Afghanistan. His identity and location are classified information, and your harassment has potentially compromised a federal witness protection case. Marcus shot Chen a look that clearly said you're embellishing, but she continued without missing a beat. Furthermore, Chen said, her voice gaining authority, your pattern of targeting military families and minorities in this neighborhood has caught the attention of the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. Agent Morrison here specializes in hate crime prosecution. A tall man in an expensive suit stepped forward, adjusting his tie. Mrs. Whitmore, filing false police reports with racial motivation qualifies as a federal civil rights violation. Combined with your documented pattern of harassment, you're looking at potential federal charges. Karen's world was crumbling in real time, but her entitlement wouldn't let her surrender gracefully. This is America. I have the right to protect my neighborhood. I have the right to call the police when I feel threatened. You absolutely do, Marcus said, his voice carrying the patient tone of someone explaining something to a particularly slow child. But you don't have the right to file false reports, engage in racial harassment, or endanger children with reckless driving. Danny finally found his courage, looking up at the intimidating collection of federal agents. Uncle Marcus, are you really a superhero? The question broke the tension momentarily, and several of the agents smiled despite themselves. Marcus knelt down to his nephew's level, his expression softening completely. Not a superhero, buddy. Just someone who learned that when bullies pick on good people, sometimes you have to stand up to them. Agent Chen cleared her throat. Colonel, Director Hayes wants you to know that if you meet anything, and I mean anything, all you have to do is call. Your service to this country hasn't been forgotten. Karen made one last desperate play, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. This is all fake. Some elaborate setup. You can't tell me that some random guy has the FBI showing up to protect him. Agent Chen exchanged a look with Marcus, who nodded slightly. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number, putting it on speaker. Director Hayes, an authoritative voice, answered after one ring. Sir, I have Colonel Thompson secure. There was a harassment situation, but it's under control. Colonel Thompson, the voice from the phone carried unmistakable authority. This is FBI Director Hayes. Are you and your family safe? Marcus stepped closer to the phone. We're fine, Director. Just a case of suburban prejudice that escalated unnecessarily. Colonel, your work in Operation Desert Silence saved countless American lives. If anyone, and I mean anyone, threatens you or your family, I want to know about it immediately. Agent Chen has full authority to handle this situation as she sees fit. Karen's face went completely white as the reality of her situation finally penetrated her entitled worldview. She had just spent the morning harassing someone who had direct access to the FBI director. As Director Hayes hung up, Agent Chen turned back to Karen with a smile that contained no warmth whatsoever. Mrs. Whitmore, I think it's time we had a more formal conversation about your recent activities. Downtown, now. 3 months later, Marcus Thompson sat on his front porch watching Danny practice soccer in the same street where Karen Whitmore had merely struck him. The soccer ball, the same one that had rolled into the gutter that morning, now sailed confidently between makeshift goals as his nephew's skills improved daily. The neighborhood had changed dramatically since that Saturday morning confrontation. Word of Karen's federal arrest had spread through the community like wildfire, and the Homeowners Association had quietly removed several board members who'd supported her discriminatory agenda. The for sale sign in front of Karen's house had been up for 6 weeks now, though rumors suggested she was having trouble finding buyers willing to overlook her legal troubles. Sergeant Reynolds pulled up in his patrol car. This wasn't an official visit. He'd been stopping by regularly, partly for the excellent coffee Marcus brewed, but mostly because he found a kindred spirit in the former colonel. How's retirement treating you, Colonel? Reynolds asked, accepting a steaming mug and settling into the adjacent chair. Better now that the excitement has died down. Marcus replied with a slight smile. Though I have to admit, Danny's been telling everyone at school that his uncle made the FBI arrest a mean lady. His teacher wants to meet me. Reynolds chuckled. Kid's got bragging rights for life. His expression grew more serious. You hear about Whitmore's sentencing? Agent Chen called this morning. 18 months federal prison for civil rights violations, 3 years probation, mandatory community service, and a permanent restraining order keeping her away from this neighborhood. Marcus sipped his coffee thoughtfully. She also has to pay restitution to all the families she harassed and attend sensitivity training. Think she learned anything? Marcus watched Danny execute a perfect penalty kick, the ball sailing straight into the goal he'd marked with orange cones. Some people learn from consequences. Others just learn to hide their prejudice better. Time will tell which category she falls into. A car pulled up, a Honda Civic with a small dent in the front bumper. Elena Martinez, Danny's mother and Marcus's sister, emerged still wearing her hospital scrubs from the night shift. She looked tired but happy as she watched her son's impromptu soccer practice. Uncle Marcus, Danny called out, abandoning his ball to run over. Mom, did you know Uncle Marcus made the bad lady go to jail? Elena laughed, ruffling her son's hair. I heard something about that, though I also heard you were being very brave that day. Uncle Marcus taught me that bullies are just scared people who never learn how to be nice, Danny said with the profound wisdom that children sometimes possess. He said the best way to beat them is to keep being good even when they're being mean. Marcus felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. After years of classified missions and shadowy operations, this protecting his family, standing up for what's right in his own neighborhood, felt like the most important mission he'd ever completed. Agent Chen's black SUV glided to a stop across the street. She approached with a manila folder in her hand and a satisfied expression on her face. "Colonel Thompson," she said, accepting the chair Marcus offered, "I wanted to give you the final report personally." Karen Whitmore's case led to a broader investigation of discriminatory practices in suburban communities. We've opened 17 similar cases across 3 states. Sometimes one person's courage to stand up creates a ripple effect, Marcus observed. Speaking of which, Chen continued, Director Hayes wanted me to ask if you consider consulting work. Nothing overseas, nothing dangerous, just helping train local law enforcement on recognizing and responding to civil rights violations. Your unique perspective could be valuable. Marcus considered the offer while watching Danny practice with a focused determination that reminded him of himself at that age. Let me think about it. Right now, I'm pretty focused on being Uncle Marcus. As the afternoon wore on, neighbors began emerging from their houses. The Johnsons brought over leftover barbecue, the same suspicious activity Karen had once reported. Dr. Patel's children joined Danny's soccer game, their laughter filling the street with joy. The Martinez family from 2 blocks over, the ones Karen had harassed for playing ethnic,